What's up, you guys? My name is Brinda, and welcome back to Booknug Chats. It has been a while since I've been on here. It's also been a couple of months since I ended up taking a break from reading. It wasn't intentional, but it happened. And I'm just so happy to be starting off this year having completed the Our Fantasy Bingo Challenge. This was a year-long challenge that started on April 1st of 2024 and it lasts till March 31st of 2025. I really didn't think I'd get over the finish line because of the 5-month long reading break that I had, but the initial 6 to 7 months that I was reading, it was so intense and I was just reading a lot of books. I read a total of 67 books, which is quite something because up until that point I hadn't been actively reading. I was reading books here and there. I've always loved reading, but after high school, like once I got into college, like I was doing my undergrad, postgrad, and then got into my professional work sphere, I really wasn't actively reading. There were maybe periods where I would pick up more books, maybe over a summer or something like that. And any fantasy books that I read during this period, though I love fantasy, I only read fantasy series that I came across through a TV show or a movie. And I would come across the first installment, and when I got to know that it was based off of a book series, I was always very curious and excited to read through the rest of it, in book form and get ahead of the story and then see how the next movies would compare to that. But this also limited the scope of the kind of fantasy books that I came across because not a lot of books are being converted into movies, and just the variety that exists within purely in the realm of books, it's unmatched. So I was really happy when I came across this Our Fantasy challenge last year. This is before I even connected with the booktube community or any online reading community. This is actually the first challenge that I came across and decided to take up, and the fact that this was a year-long challenge and I actually stuck with it and have been able to finish it, it feels like a really good sense of achievement. And also the first video that I made on my channel last year was planning on my TBR for this challenge, so it was quite defining in terms of all the books that I ended up reading. There were a lot of challenges that I participated in the 6 to 7 super active months of reading, but most of the challenges I tried my best to overlap with books that I already had on my TBR, and this really functioned as kind of my blueprint or landscape. And I also did not really know what kind of subgenres existed within fantasy or where to even begin exploring. So when I wanted to start reading more fantasy series and books, it really pushed me to read a lot of books that I normally would not have read. There were also books that I didn't think I would actually like or enjoy, and I have been so surprised. I've truly been able to explore such a vast variety of books within fantasy, the subgenres, the types of fantasy landscapes and worlds and characters and themes and tones, and also the fact that in this challenge you can't repeat authors. It exposed me to so many different writing styles of fantasy authors, and I've really discovered the kind of things that I absolutely enjoy within the realm of fantasy, what I love reading. I have so many favorite authors that I'm so excited to continue reading books by, and also continue some of the series that I've already begun, also new series that I haven't yet read, and I am looking forward to getting to explore in this year. Honestly, I was very happy. Like February, I just had this spark to read again, and I picked up a book. I finished reading it in 3 days, and I remember that it was on my TBR for this challenge. So after almost half a year, I decided to go and check in on where I was at with this challenge. I also hadn't logged in the reads for 2 months from last year, and so once I did that, I was so happy to see that I only had 3 prompts remaining, and that was very doable in the span of 5 weeks. And I'm just really glad that I was able to finish out something that I started, and I had already made so much headway with it that it would have been a shame if I if I didn't give it that little extra push and get it over the finish line. But this year I'm going to be much more limited in the amount of books that I read. I really want to take my time with with the books that I read this year and also take my time to read longer books and longer series. Last year, I think I was just so overwhelmed with all the challenges I was participating in and also trying to do a blackout of this Our Fantasy Bingo challenge that I didn't want to be in the middle of multiple series all at the same time. I like to, if I start a series, if I'm in the flow with that book, I like to just continue reading on the series, but that would make it very difficult for me to actually finish a challenge like the Our Fantasy Bingo challenge. Though predominantly I do enjoy reading fantasy books within the realm of fiction, I also like reading some other fiction, especially mysteries. And outside of that, I read a lot of nonfiction. Even the decade long where I wasn't reading, it was more specific to fiction books. I was reading a lot of nonfiction, and I read a diverse range of nonfiction books. One of the things that I have to say I really like about the bingo challenge it is that it doesn't start on January and then ends in December. I like having that little buffer period of a few months, just settling into a new year and settling into a new challenge, and then also having those extra few months to finish out the challenge. So that's something that I'm really happy with. There's always a lot going on, I feel, end of year and beginning of a new year, and this just allows you to offset a little things and just settle into it better. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the 2025 prompts are going to be. If I do participate in the Our Fantasy Bingo Challenge, I will most likely not try to do a blackout. I will keep it more limited to maybe doing certain rows and see how it goes more organically. I'm not going to plan out a very specific TBR. If I have books in mind that fit for those prompts, I'll put them in, but I'm not going to commit to books for all the prompts. So that's been my overall experience with the Our Fantasy Challenge. Let's get into what books I read for each of the prompts and whether I was able to complete the hard levels or hard modes. I actually didn't try to complete the hard mode. If I could, I did, but it was hard enough without the hard mode. So yeah, I just made it a little bit easier on myself, frankly. But I did switch around books from what I had initially planned with my TBR. Mostly it's the same books, but I've just moved them around. And there are a couple of prompts where I just discovered books. So I have replaced it with the books that I ended up reading, and I found that they did suffice for those prompts. So without further ado, let's take a look at my bingo board. I have this etch stamp over here, which I'm going to put in for any of the titles where I have completed the hard mode. So let's begin with first in a series. I could have used many different books over here, but I decided to put in Daughter of the Pirate King. I had a very fun time reading this, very entertaining, indulgent, but just right in terms of its length, 300 pages. And I had a lot of fun with this. I wanted to read something with a pirate adventure with good slow burn tension, and this kind of had everything packed into just the right length of a book. This is a series, I believe it's a duology, but there is a third book I've seen. So the hard mode for this prompt would be if the series is three books or more. But even though I have read books that are part of longer series, I'm not going to be able to put them in here because I'm using them in other places. So no hard mode here. For alliterative title, I chose Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lin. Beautiful middle grade fantasy inspired by Chinese folklore, and it just felt like a dream. I actually read this book with music on in the background, and the music was just so perfect. It doesn't always work, but it added such a great atmosphere to what I was reading, and I had the best time reading this cozy fantasy, and it's so adventurous, really lovely. It has three words in the title which start with the same letter, so this does qualify for the hard mode. I'm gonna put this over here. For Under the Surface, initially I tried reading A Letter to the Luminous Deep. I thought the letter format would be interesting after having read Divine Rivals, but I didn't connect with the writing at all, just reading 2 pages. So I switched to my other alternative read, which was Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. This is actually the first Eastern influenced fantasy that I have read, and I fell in love with it. It's a mystical realm that she enters into underwater in the sea, and definitely more than half of the story takes place underwater. So this does qualify for the hard prompt. I really love the themes that were woven into the story, and that's a common thing I'm noticing with Eastern fantasies. Just themes of friendship, family, society, community, and the cultural elements that shine through. I really love exploring those. For criminals, I put in The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. I had some other picks for this, but I wasn't planning on reading this, but I am so glad I did. This book was amazing. It's just I love the concept. I love the magic system. It was so fascinating. And the main character, Shai, she's one of the most intelligent and badass, most mature female characters that I've read. And all of this was packed into a novella under 200 pages. I cannot even believe it. So this she's an art forger, so she was a criminal, and there was a heist that was featured, I think briefly, but it was there. Yeah, so I can put in the hard mode for this as well. For dreams, I put in The Mask of Arabella. This is just a book. I love the cover. I picked it up at the library. It's a middle grade fantasy, a debut novel by Anna Houghton. And I thought the atmosphere was so beautiful. It was set in Venice, had a lot of magic, adventure, tropes that you really loved, chosen one, magical school, in this case, a hotel, and different kinds of magic, and realizing that you have magic at a particular age, those kind of themes. I thought it was beautifully written. And yeah, very lovely story. So I do remember there was a dream in here, and I think it was a normal dream. As far as I remember, it wasn't a magical dream. She just had a nightmare of some sort. So this will also qualify for the hard prompt. Well, I'm doing pretty well with the hard prompts in the first row. Okay, moving on to the second row. Entitled Animals, I put in An Enchantment of Ravens. This was so beautiful. The descriptions of the seasons, and the main character here is a painter. So I just loved the descriptions. It was so vivid. This was a fairy romance, and I loved some of the themes of superficiality and what it means to be human that were woven in here, and really retaining your human soul and your human creativity, which in this case was something that was missing in the Fey realm. So, yeah, good conversation about the things that we value. Okay, so I just checked the hard mode for this, and it's that the animal mentioned should be a fantasy creature being, but that's not the case here, so I'm not going to put this in. For bards, oh goodness, this is actually a prompt I struggled with the most somehow. Everyone was reading River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, but I was using another book of hers for another prompt, so I couldn't use that here. I actually had quite a good selection, but somehow nothing clicked, or rather, I just didn't end up reading any of it. But this is the last prompt that I completed this year in the last 2 weeks. I happened to read an arc, The Legends of Rosa, and this is my very first arc, but it's a collection of short stories. And the first story, it has a character who is a musician and a storyteller, and her journey is very much connected to these two things. So I thought it was perfect. I can put this in. But it doesn't fulfill the hard mode because she's not called a bard explicitly. For all intents and purposes, she is, but this also does not qualify for the hard mode then. For prologues and epilogues, I put in Wings of Fire by Joyce Sutherland. I loved this middle grade fantasy. It has war, politics, it's exciting, it's adventurous. It had me, there were so many twists, and it also has a the characters are all dragons, and they have so much personality. It's very heartwarming and full of friendships. And yeah, I love this series. I've read 2 books so far, and there are 3 more in the series. So I will be reading this. This did have both prologue and epilogue. Somehow I struggled with finding a book which had both. Maybe it's because I was reading a lot of standalone books, so that's probably why. For self-published or indie publisher, I actually stumbled across Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by Jay Penner. This was such a lovely, cozy fantasy. It covered a baking a baking competition, and it had a very high fantasy world with low stakes. It was really beautiful in terms of its descriptions of the food. It makes you feel so hungry, and I love the quality of the fantasy world that she created in here. This is part of a series of standalones. I did read the second one, and it was nice as well. The ending is a little cliche and cheesy, but I didn't mind it. It was very cute, and I like the romance as well. For romantasy, this is I had to put this in here, A Coat of Thorns and Roses. This honestly, last year when I first read a new fantasy series, this was one of the first ones before I even knew what romantasy as a genre was, and I had such a fun time reading the trilogy. It was quite exciting, like towards the end of the first book, that's where it really picked up. Until then it was like a normal story and I was just reading it and I was like, okay, cool. But the end got me, and then the second and third books were really fun and exciting. But yeah, it's one of those entertaining, indulgent sort of reads. I won't be reading anything more by Sarah J Maas, I don't think, because I wanted to read her Throne of Glass series. I actually had that on my TBR for this challenge, but after I read the fourth book in this series and the fifth book, which I struggled, I read 50% of it and I couldn't finish it. There are a lot of things that stood out to me in terms of the writing style that consistently I was not able to continue reading. For Dark Academia, this was a prompt which is a little bit out of my comfort zone. Why, though, I don't know. I mean, I like the academia aspect. I think I don't like the dark aspect as much, or the gothic elements. But I did enjoy this. The writing was beautiful. The emotions, the way Farid writes them, I felt it was very palpable. I love the male character in this. I didn't enjoy the manner and the fairy elements related to that. Uh, but I liked the mystery aspect that this book had, and I loved the literary kind of debate aspects, and also the way the chapters were referencing, books, and they were researching things. And yeah, I love those elements. For multiple point of views, I read Six of Crows. Oh, this is just so good, so good. I finally read the duology of the Gray Showers, and this. It's just amazing. I love it. I love all the characters. I love the banter. I love the dynamics that the characters have, the chemistry. It's so good. The way Le Bardugo writes her characters, it's just amazing. And the fact that this is such an ensemble of cast of characters, and it's done so well. Like, going through different point of views, it can get very confusing or messy, but it wasn't. It was so perfect. Every character's motivations, desires were so clearly mapped out, their fears, and the journey that they go on, it was very action packed. The plot was great. I loved everything about it. So much fun. For published in 2024, I read Where the Dog Stands Still. I actually read this just in the last 2 weeks. So this was one of the prompts I had remaining, and I completed it this year. Very dark, mysterious, monstrous, enchanted forest, but still it managed to be cozy. So I was pleasantly surprised with this book. I enjoyed the audiobook a lot. So yeah, this was great. Character with a disability, I actually wanted to have Six of Crows over here. Uh, because Kaz has a physical disability, but Half a Soul is what I ended up reading again this year. This is one of those prompts. And she essentially is unable to feel her full range of emotions, and is not able to be as socially aware because of that. And it's because she has half a soul. So I think in the fantasy settings, this does qualify as a disability. So I'm going to be using it here. I originally was going to use this for another prompt, but yeah, I had to move things around. So this is here. And then published in the 90s, I had quite a few options that I went through, which somehow none of them stuck. I tried reading Golden Compass for this. I had borrowed it from the library, but it didn't click with me. I didn't feel like reading it. Finally, I did this Draconathon reading challenge, and I read Dealing with Dragon. This was fun. It's a very self-aware fairy tale, which subverts some of the common tropes, and this princess is very sassy, and yeah, this was a really fun little read. Oh, okay. Considering the hard mode for all of these, let me go through it as part of the row. So the school itself is entirely mundane. Actually, is the school mundane? I think the school is mundane. Like there's I'm gonna put this as hard mode for now because I think the school itself was mundane. Like there was knowledge about fairies, but I don't think it was mainstream. Like even her research was some like kind of going against the grain. I read this a while back, so I hope I'm right about this. I'll double check it in the end, but yeah, I think I'll put this here. The hard mode for this is that it should have at least five characters, five point of views, and this one definitely had that. So this qualifies for the hard mode as well. For published in 2024, hey, okay, so I did check this one, and it the essentially the it should also be the author's debut novel, and it was her debut novel, which is yeah, which is great. And then for half a soul, for a character with a disability, a main character should have the disability. This does qualify for that. So let's put this in here. And for published in the 1990s, the author should have published something in the last 5 years. I did check this and she hasn't. So no hard mode here. Okay, moving on to the next row. Orcs, trolls, and goblins. Oh my. I would not have originally thought that I would like reading something with a lot of high fantasy beings and creatures, especially not as main characters. But then I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. I loved it. Such a wonderful personal journey that Viv goes on, and everything is written so beautifully. It's so cozy and just the perfect slice of life. And yeah, just all the descriptions of food and the little discoveries they make along the way while she's trying to start her new business. I loved all those elements. This one was space opera, and this is the one I'm choosing to replace with a prompt from any of the previous bingo cards. And so I decided to choose name in the title. So I placed Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies for name in the title. This was one of my favorite reads from last year, along with Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, The Emperor's Soul. Actually, I tried my best to insert the books I liked the most for every prompt as much as possible because I did read 67 books, and there were prompts like I was able to move things around and only include the best of the books that I wanted to. So this was one of my favorite reads. I've only read the first book as of now, and I'm looking forward to finishing out the two because the next two books are out. I think the last book was released this year. And even Legends and Lattes, I'm looking forward to reading Bookshops and Bone Dust. I think that'll be a really nice, fun read in between any longer series or just if the mood strikes. For author of color, I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sulan Tan. Beautiful Eastern fantasy. Just the descriptions of the celestial world and kingdoms were amazing. I loved the inspiration with the folklores that existed in this. This is definitely a romantasy book, and I really liked how the author approached it, and the depth and detail that she added with the characters and the timelines, and I think it made it more believable for me, and I really enjoyed this one. I didn't read the second book because somehow I didn't feel a need to continue, but I do want to go back to reading the second book because she has another book in the Celestial Kingdoms, and she's also releasing another standalone in the Celestial, in the same kind of fantasy realm that she's created. So I would love to, yeah, I would love to continue. Like, I don't have to read the next one, but I would like to. I think I was overwhelmed last year when I was reading this, and I didn't feel like continuing on the series at the time. For survival, I put in The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I mean, the prompt is essentially that the primary goal of the characters and story is focused on survival. And honestly, the main character here is constantly trying to survive because she's a human in this world. And I actually like that she didn't really um, she wasn't she didn't really turn into a fae. She continued to be a human, and that added that additional degree of challenge and struggle that she faced. So she was constantly trying to survive, and I loved this series, just the twists and turns. I didn't think I would like um traditional fae folklore and reading a book with that so much, but yeah, the political intrigue was great. The storytelling, the pacing of the book was great. They're not too long. I love when I feel like the authors have a very clear vision of where the story is going and it feels complete, starting to finish. So I really felt like the series had that. Judging a book by its cover, I put in Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is such a beautiful cover, and I bought this book. I don't buy a lot of books. There are a few more that I really want to buy from here, which I would like to have as part of my collection. But I was originally going to put in Enchantment of Ravens, but I put this in. Now, going across this row for the hard mode, let's um, let's see if these qualify. So hard mode for this is that it should be a main character, which it was for the orcs. And for Okay, so I just checked, and the hard mode for this is that both the first and last name of the character should be in the title. And Emily Wilde, it's right there. For author of color, it should also be their debut novel published in the last 5 years, which this is. So this also qualifies for the hard mode. And then for survival, it should not be any super viruses or pandemics. Again, this also qualifies for the hard mode, which is great. And then for Divine Rivals, okay, I did have other books that I selected just solely based on the cover, like Mask of Arabella and also Enchantment of Ravens. For Divine Rivals, I didn't really read the synopsis or blurb, but I had picked it up from a recommendation somebody made in a YouTube video, I think. So I don't know if this qualifies or not. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Okay, moving on to the last and final row. Set in a small town, I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This was such a fun, humorous read. I loved it. The hard mode for this is that it should be set in the real world, and it was. And it was actually quite refreshing to read a book which wasn't a huge fantasy world, just simple, like it's our regular world, but it has magic in it. And so I really like that. Actually, I would like to read more books that are maybe in this category now. So yeah, I think Regency, not yeah, Regency era fairy tales or just fairy books tend to have this sort of balance where it's kind of set in a more normal world sometimes, but then they end up going into a very enchanted realm. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies was also very much set in the real world, but then they end up going into an enchanted realm. So that's different. For five short stories, I actually read, this was the only prompt where you could repeat authors. And so there are a lot of side novels that I read for a lot of the series that I was reading. So King of Elfhame in the Cruel Prince series, this was the fourth book. I read that. Then from Grisha Verse, I ended up reading two books, Language of Thorns and Demon in the Woods, which was a graphic novel. Loved it. Court of Frost and Starlight was a huge disappointment, and it's what kind of put me off from um yeah, I don't know, it just burst the bubble that the first trilogy had. Or I don't know if the writing was just be- worse in this one. I'm not sure what it was, but anyway. And then I read The Huntress. It's a short novella by Michael J. Miller. He has a series, a dragon series, Ascendant, and I was planning on reading that. Didn't get around to it yet, but this was a really nice short, yeah, novella. Yeah, so these are the five books and collection of stories that I read. The next prompt is Eldritch Creatures, and I would have struggled with this prompt, honestly, because I don't really like very dark, monstrous things. And I happen to have read the Wraith King series by Grace Raven, and it's truly a testament to her writing. The way she writes her romance is amazing, so mature. I loved the first book, Radiance, and the second book was also good. That's where the Eldritch Creatures showed up. With the third book, The Ipos King, it actually follows two different characters. It's continuous in terms of the storyline, but I love this book. It had the perfect balance of the romance and the plot. I love the first book as well. That was more focused on the romance, and this one was just this really great travel adventure, and yeah, great plot, great romance. Ah, loved it. Reference materials, I finally read The Hobbit. Had put this off for a long time, and yeah, it has all the reference materials. I think this would also qualify for the hard mode. Wait, let me check what the hard mode for the Eldritch Creatures is. The book is not related to the, I think I had checked initially, and yeah, I don't think it was related to, I don't know how to pronounce this, Thulu mythos. I have no idea. Okay, so For the last and final prompt, the book club or read along book, I decided to put in The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This was a very cozy fantasy. There are a lot of elements that I really enjoyed with this. There are also some things that I didn't enjoy as much as, to the extent to which everyone loved it. And considering I love cozy fantasy, there were things that were just a miss for me, but I did enjoy it. It was a good read. And that's it. That's a wrap for my Art Fantasy 2024 bingo. This is my first time participating in this challenge and the first time I've been able to just do an entire blackout. I think my hard mode, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Not bad. I was able to do 15 hard mode prompts. That's it for this video, you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye.